Hey everyone, welcome to the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning on YouTube or any of the podcast directories, we just ask you one teeny tiny little favor. If you find any value in this episode, or I found value in the episodes prior, we just ask that you refer us to a friend. We are trying to impact as many people on their walk to wealth as we can. Without further ado, I have a super special guest, Susie. For anyone that may not know you, tell us your elevator pitch. Who are you? What do you do?
I am Susie Hayes, and I help people access internal resources they never knew they had in order to create what they never knew they could. And I do that through counseling, coaching, and hypnosis, writing, and speaking.
Amazing, Susie. And, I had the pleasure and the opportunity to get to know a little bit about your story, but tell the audience, tell us about your walk to wealth. Where does this whole journey begin? Where does it take place?
Well, in terms of my walk to wealth, this has been an ongoing process of my life, which is really about learning how to create a quality of life. And that constantly changes as we mature. But part of what is so important in that journey is having the appreciation and the awareness that we really do deserve to live the highest quality of life that we're committed to creating.
Yeah. And so, where does that kind of start with you in terms of what was your relationship with money kind of growing up and with the idea of wealth, and how did that impact you along your journey?
For me, growing up, I was always taught that the love of money was the root of all evil.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gave me a very powerfully strong message that it was something to be afraid of. And that if you wanted it too much, that it was going to take you toward disaster. And I was also taught that I should always be saving for a rainy day. And I dismissed that because I thought, well, what's the point? Because rainy days are going to be coming anyway. So I had to really work through some of those early beliefs that were really spoken with good intention, but created a relationship of fear for me with money. Like I wasn't sure if it was really okay for me to want to have a good quality of life. So those early messages didn't really do me any favors. And I had to work through those. And for me, it was really about coming to an awareness of deciding what it was that I truly deserved. And I certainly knew that I had skills and ability. I had a strong work ethic, if you will. I had been raised with good values in that way. So, and I had grown up in a home where we were very comfortable financially, but my parents had gone through the Depression. And so
Yeah.
they've been conditioned to really anticipate deprivation. And so that impacted me as a little girl. That impacted me that I kind of took on some of their fear.
And so I guess from fighting all these limiting beliefs that were kind of instilled in you, as you said, with good intention, I had a very similar story as, with money and how the, in my culture, kind of like work till you die type of thing where it's like, you never stop working and stuff like that. And it's like a lot of these things that, don't do us any, favors or don't do us any good, but are all said and taught with good intention. If you could try to pinpoint it down to the day where it suddenly shifted, what happened that made you start realizing that, hey, maybe some of these beliefs that I was taught actually aren't, doing me any good, aren't actually working out in my favor, and made you want to start shifting to where you are now so that you can live the quality of life that you so desire, and then start also helping other people reach the life that, quality of life that they desire. So what really made you, or what, different, line of events occurred that made you start shifting your perspective to start seeking out more and different ways of viewing the world?
For me, it was a progression of change. And it began with coming to a place of knowing that I deserved to have a good quality of life. And in that, I also knew that I had the gifts and the abilities to create wealth, to create abundance in my life. And I also knew that I had something of value to offer to the world. And as I became more clear about those realities, my actions really started to move in alignment with that, meaning that I knew that I had something to offer of value to the world. And so in that, I no longer made choices where I was underselling myself or I was giving away services that really people needed to be able to invest in and to know the value of that. And that was probably one of the greatest shifts for me because I wanted to be of service to people. I wanted to provide something for people. And I would often find people say, well, I just can't afford that. And I found that if in some way I made a choice to adjust a contract, to reduce fees, and it wasn't always the case, but sometimes I found out that when I did that, it really it sent a message to people I worked with that they should do that too. They should undervalue what they had to offer to the world. So I then began to realize, when I ask people to invest at a value that matches what I'm providing, it gives dignity to the work that I do, and it gives dignity to them in their investment in that. And I realized that was a really important message to send out into the world experientially with the people that I was working with. That, for me, was a real major shift in my business.
And then one last question I kind of want to ask you before we really get into today's conversation. So, is how did you get over, maybe, I don't know if it was fear, or maybe how did you gain the confidence to then help other people? Because you helped yourself in your own life get from where you were, originally started from, with all the limiting beliefs as a child, and you broke free from all of those. But then what made you, gain the confidence that then start helping other people do that? Because a lot of people, they get good at certain things, and then they'll know they're kind of good at it, but then they're always, question if they're good enough to help other people with it. Right. So how did you get the confidence and the skills necessary, I guess you could say, to take the talents and the skills that you've developed over the course of your life and then start sharing those with other people?
That's a good question. John, I don't know really how to exactly answer that. I'm thinking about that because that too was a progression. Like when I was younger, it was sort of like I was just so eager to do what I was doing. I loved the work that I was doing that I didn't really think that much about it in terms of confidence. I just wanted to do it. So I would just start working with people, and I kind of learned as I went along, and the more experience I gained, the easier it became. And I didn't really think about it in terms of gaining confidence. For me, I just kind of started out. I had a mentor in the counseling department at my graduate school that saw my skills and kind of took me under his wing and allowed me to go into an early internship. And so I really gained from his confidence, oh, I must have skills and abilities to do this. And so I really committed myself to learning everything I could. So as I went along, my confidence built proportionately to my experience and the resources that I gathered to myself. And I've been an ongoing student. I've been doing this for decades now, and I'm still learning. I'm still curious. I'm still asking questions. I'm still growing. I'm still learning new tools. And I'm always open in terms of expanding and developing the work that I do. So it's been maybe a combination of all of those factors that has brought me to the level of confidence where I am today, which is really as a result of my education, my experience, and the duration of doing the work for as long as I've been doing it. It's like I kind of got this down. I kind of know what I'm doing.
Yeah. And so, Susie, you've been able to start, as you mentioned, your journey and take that off. And one problem that a lot of people face, and as you know, the quote, or at least you might have heard the quote, the hardest belt to get is the white belt, right? Because the majority of people never start. And so I know this is where you kind of, you specialize in. So like, how do people take their dreams, their thoughts, their, desires, their ambitions, whatever they have stored up in their, either their heart or their head, and actually start so that they're not stuck forever, and actually begin the process of manifesting that into their lives and making that more of just a thought or a hope or a wish or dream, and actually into something that they're doing that's fulfilling them, and hopefully making ends meet as well by doing what fulfills them and paying the bills from it as well, and turning hopefully that into maybe a business of some sort. How does one person begin on that journey so that they take it out of here and into the real world?
That is such an excellent question, and not an easy question to answer, because we have to balance the responsibilities of our lives. Right? We have to put food on the table, and we have to pay the rent or the mortgage, and we have to pay our bills, and we have to take care of our health, and all of those very practical, pragmatic things that are a part of what we now call adulting. And we have to do those things right, or otherwise we create more problems for ourselves. So whenever we're pursuing a dream, whatever that might be, it's really important that we put together, as best we can, a strategy to continue to take care of the responsibilities we have while developing or expanding the dream that we have. And honestly, that can often take a lot of energy. It means that we have to take care of our responsibilities, and then we have to carve out the time to cultivate the dream in whatever that means for us. And one of the greatest challenges in that, I think, is really getting clear about what that dream is. I talk about it as one of the elements in terms of getting freed from stuck, is really about creating a vision of where we want to go, or where we believe we will be if we accomplish whatever it is. And the more vivid, the more emotionally charged that vision is, the more it magnetizes us in what I call crossing the bridge from stuck to freed from stuck. It compels us forward, and it fuels us forward to where we want to be. So that's actually the second element that I identify in the freed from stuck process. But it's really, really important that we do that, because when we're crossing that bridge and things get tough and the wind starts blowing and the bridge starts rocking, we need to be able to look to that destination and to have a clear heart and head connection to it.
And so then I guess I could ask you, how does one have a clear heart and head connection? As you know, it's almost a constant battle between the two, right? Especially like one, example that probably everyone or a lot of people can resonate with, it's relationships, right? It's like they know that person they shouldn't be in a relationship with, but their heart's telling them one thing, and that's your typical classic, I guess, example of that. But the heart and head aren't always aligned. So how would one then, backtrack a little bit, how does one then get that heart and that head aligned so that when the roads get rocky, when the bridge starts getting shaky and, the floor beneath you is wobbly and you don't know how you're going to make it through when the storms start coming, that you could still see that final destination and not see a destination for your head and a destination for your heart. And they actually are one the same, not two separate destinations.
Well, usually the conflict that we feel is an indicator that something is not in alignment, right? Because if we have a dream that we want to create, we want to pursue that, whatever that is, and we say, that's in my heart, my heart is really leading me to that. It may not necessarily be our mind that's blocking us. It may be some part of us that is either afraid or critical, that's trying to protect us from pursuing that. And so part of what we can do is we can actually have an internal dialogue between or among those parts that are in conflict to come to a resolution and understanding that even those parts inside of us that are in conflict, their intention is good. So, for example, if there's a part of us that compels us toward a self-destructive behavior, i.e., smoking, drinking excessively, or whatever, the intention of that part is not to destroy us. There's a purposeful need that it's attempting to meet, right? Everybody knows that smoking is not good for our health, yet people smoke. Why? For lots of reasons. Has to do with social connection. It has to do with relaxation. And so if the value of that behavior is high enough, it will override what we know, we say in our mind, that it's not good for our health because it's attempting to meet a need. So if we're going to make a change, then we have to have some sort of internal dialogue around that to discover how do we meet that need in a different way so that we're able to let go of what's not serving that need. So we have to have an understanding of what the need is that's being met, even by a self-destructive or self-sabotaging behavior, in order to redirect our actions and find other ways to meet those needs that are going to be in alignment with what I call our true self, which is always in alignment with both our mind and our heart. And so sometimes it's really about kind of just sitting down and doing that work, having that conversation within ourselves and figuring out what is it that I really, really want, and how do I discover a way to get there that is realistic, that has manageable steps, and that sometimes it's just that first step that we take that is the hardest. But the most simple first step we can take is really, really powerful. And then if we find that our mind and our heart is still not in alignment, we need to go back and re-examine that, because it wastes a tremendous amount of energy to attempt to go forward when we're in conflict that way.
Yeah. And so then let me ask you, because a lot of my audience is, part of around my age. And so that whole idea of, your true self, or, what it is that you want to do when for your rest of your life. It's like questions like those are very hard to, really think about, very sometimes scary to some people. Sometimes, people have to, it's hard because sometimes you have to do a little bit of reflecting, and people may have, things that they still haven't, really healed from yet. So it's like, how does one begin the process of, I know it's a multivariate, problem or issue, I guess you said, but like revealing that true self so that, we could be in alignment with what we do. We could find our, have our purpose in being fulfilled and giving the best of what we have to serve the world at the best level that we possibly can. How does one start to begin to like think about, what actually is my true self in a way that's not too daunting or scary or whatever it may be?
It's such an excellent question. And I was thinking that you posed it in terms of people who are younger are
Mhm.
sort of find that daunting. I don't think that that's age exclusive. I think that people in general find that exploration of the self sometimes to be a bit overwhelming, which is, of course,
Hmm.
why there are professionals like myself to help people in that journey. But what's beautiful about really asking those questions when you're younger is that, one, it can save you a lot of suffering and pain, right? Like if you get it when you're younger and you make the choices.
Hmm.
For example, we were talking earlier about beliefs with finances. My father used to say to me, it's really important for you to save. And, I grew up with a piggy bank and, all of that stuff. But as an adult, he really didn't teach me how to do that, right? He didn't take me to a financial planner to help me set up a program to really know what that was about and how to do it effectively. It was just like, you should save money. Well, that might sound good, but if I don't have a process that makes sense to me and that's manageable as a young person with, when you're starting out, your income obviously is more limited usually than as you mature and develop in your field. So I was at a disadvantage, and yes, I could have, and I did eventually, in my late 20s, find a financial planner who would work with me and help me understand that process. But it's important in those processes that are daunting, like financial planning. That was very daunting to me. I knew nothing about it. I didn't know all that number crunching, right? I needed someone who knew what they were doing that I trusted to help me understand and make good decisions. So the same is true in terms of self-awareness. We live in an age there's just incredible information. It used to be that information was power. Information is not power anymore. There's so much information. What is powerful is having the skill to apply the information. That's really where the power is. And
Hmm.
so it's important that we find people who can help us in that journey, whether it is a coach or a therapist or a mentor or a wise family member or a respected spiritual leader, whoever you can find in your circle that, or outside of your circle, you may need to go outside of that to find individuals who have been successful, who are insightful, who have the wisdom, who have the compassion, the understanding to help guide you and teach you one of the most important skills in the world, and that is asking good questions. I always say that was the greatest skill my father ever gave me. He taught me how to ask really good questions. He cultivated my curiosity. And we would have these amazing debates sometimes, and we would not agree often. And it was okay. It was really okay. He would get frustrated sometimes, but it gave me permission to be curious, to ask good questions, to create, to think outside the box. What an amazing heritage to have that kind of support as a child to be able to move into the adult world and continue to do that effectively. So that's what I would encourage people to do is use those instinctive abilities that you have. We were born curious. We learned to not be curious. We were born with curiosity. We were born with an openness to life and to the world. And we learned to be afraid. We learned to pull back. We learned to hunker down. We learn to hold ourselves back. And so it's really important that we seek to open up and to open ourselves up to the possibilities of life, and that we find those individuals in our life who can guide us and support us and encourage us in moving forward.
Yeah, and so I think a lot of the problems that a lot of young people face now, and I don't know how it was like when you were younger, but I feel like now, especially because social media, and but a lot of younger people, they're very close minded, like extremely close. I think, at least from my personal experience, more now so than ever,
Hmm.
and that's another thing that tends to keep people stuck. without them realizing it because they're too stuck in their ways. They think they know it all, or they're too stubborn, or maybe, they don't want to listen, especially in like earlier, teenage years. I didn't think that's universal, but no matter, what generation you're in, the teenage years seem to be that years where no one can tell you anything, especially those young adult years where I feel like a lot of people in the younger generation now ha tend to have lost respect for the people who walked the path long before them, and they think that they're good or times are different or things, and not realizing that no matter who it is, that you can learn something from everyone. And nowadays too, a lot of people, as you mentioned, you grew up in a household where you can ask questions and be curious and engage in dialect and on matters that there were disagreements in. And nowadays it's like if you disagree in anything, depending on what it is that you're disagreeing in, it could go south very quickly for your reputation, for your career, for a lot of different things. It could go very negatively. And I feel like a lot of people in the younger generation are starting to become more closed and more narrow minded, more so than ever, because they think, whether it's for whatever the case may be. But so I guess, how does one then maintain that curiosity, that open mindedness, that to when society is telling you like this is the way you're supposed to go down, whether it's you have to go to college, or society also tells you have to work until you're 65 before you retire, then decide to live your life. Like when you have all these societal and cultural and maybe peer pressure attacking you all at the same time, forcing you to think one way or another, how does one kind of maintain that open-mindedness so that they can, engage in this world with curiosity and open-mindedness and figure themselves out while they learn from other people and hopefully take away some things, maybe like might leave some parts out. But how does one maintain and protect that open-mindedness?
That is such an amazing question and so important. As you were saying that, I really felt a sadness as you identified that as being part of youth today in a more powerful way, a more negatively powerful way. I feel sad when you say that. I also can appreciate that when people are, if you will, narrow-minded, or they get into a certain mindset where they are defensive about certain issues or beliefs or choices, that narrowness speaks to fear. We can only be curious when we feel safe to be curious. And when we feel safe to be curious, like it's okay for me to ask questions, it's okay for me to explore, I'm okay in the world, I'm safe, then we have the ability to kind of take off the blinders and open our eyes and expand our peripheral vision to be able to look all around us. But when we're afraid, we have to keep that tunnel vision because we believe that what I call sort of a fundamentalist way of thinking, like this is the way, this is what's true. When we get into that kind of tunnel thinking, it really limits our capacity to see the world in a broader way, to open us up to possibilities, to allow us to embrace opportunities that come to us. When we have a narrow perspective, we only see so much and we don't see other potential around us. And so part of what is going to need to happen when people are in this fearful place is that something's going to have to shift at a deeper level for people to begin to shift their focus from that which fuels fear, to shift their focus to what fuels an understanding of the reality of the abundance of life. We have more resources on the planet than we have ever had. We have more streams of financial opportunities on this planet than we've ever had. We have better technology. We have better communication. We have opportunity for greater connection. And so if something is not working, it has nothing to do with our external environment. It has everything to do with what we are believing at that deeper place inside of us. And if
Mm.
we believe that the world is an unsafe, scary place to live, it's understandable we're going to hunker down and we're going to try to protect what we believe that we have. But when we begin to look at the world and appreciate our world and appreciate one another, and we seek to expand and connect and come together and cultivate a better world, when we understand that that is possible and that we have more resources than we've ever had to do that, then we can open up and expand because that feels safe. So it's really that foundational belief of, am I safe? Is the world safe? Can I trust myself? Can I trust those around me? And until there is a shift in how we see ourselves and others in the world around us, we will continue to make choices out of fear. And that never serves us well. Never.
Yeah, definitely. I 100% agree with that. The fear coming from that fear or scarcity, another way to kind of call it, a mindset never produces any good outcome. And it's that a simple old saying, if you could see the glass half full or half empty, and you could tell that a lot of people who are half empty thinkers find themselves in the situations where life kind of feels as if it's against them because they magnetize those things that are negative because of the way that they're viewing things. And it's a never ending cycle because then it's like, well, then what you believe will end up manifesting, and what manifests will end up fueling back into what you end up believing. And it's like you kind of always see yourself stuck in that cycle and stuck in that cycle. And another thing that I love that you mentioned too is about the abundance of opportunity. I always say that, we live in we're like currently in the age of the greatest transfer of wealth in history. And I think Gary Vee was talking about it one time. He was like, I think it was Gary Vee. I forgot who it was, but he was saying that, I would hate to have to say to my grandchildren that I lived during the great transfer of wealth and I didn't take part in any of it, which is why we're struggling today, right? We have more opportunity. Information is more accessible. This podcast is free. It's going to be out everywhere, right? Like there's no excuse for, a limit of information. And so it's like, and despite that though, people still decide to choose victimhood. People still decide to choose to make the world the antagonist. People still choose to make the system the antagonist. While other people who are abundantly thinking I feel like they're the saying, like, if you don't claim what's yours, what's rightfully meant for you, whether that's because of your victim mentality or because you think the world's a terrible place or unsafe or fear, bad or evil, there's going to be someone that is abundantly minded that is going to claim all that was meant for them. And because they're abundantly minded, they will end up taking what's meant for you because you were too scared. You were too stuck in fearfulness, I feel. Because some people, they're willing to go the extra mile. They're willing to put another 5 hours in at work every week. They're willing to work the graveyard shift. They're willing to travel further for work. Some people in this world are just willing to do more than other people. And if you don't do what is required to at least claim what's yours, because they always say, what's meant for you will always be for you. But then I feel like that also kind of gets to that point where it's like, it incentivizes people almost in a way to just do nothing because what's meant for them is someone going to magically find their way towards them without them having to put any work in. And I kind of lost where I was going with all that, honestly. But long story short, people tend to, assume that everything is going to end up working in their favor without them putting any work in. And that also keeps them stuck. So I guess my advice for you is then, as you said, in this world where there's an abundance of opportunity, what advice would you give to people that, for whatever reason, aren't taking advantage of any of this and they're just letting life pass day in, day out without them, starting to actualize what's meant for them?
Well, I would like to comment, John, on a couple of things that you said that I think are so important and so vital to understanding the change process. Whenever someone is experiencing abundance in their life, they're not taking anything away from you, right?
Yeah.
It's like there's so much to go around. Someone is out creating abundance. They're not taking it away from you. You have just as much opportunity as they do because of the massive resources that we have available to us. So that's so important. Just because someone else is highly successful does not mean you're going to be deprived. So we need to really appreciate that one. So will the wealthy get wealthier? Yes, they will. But it doesn't mean you can't create your own wealth. So that's really essential to understand. And victimhood, oh, don't get me started on that. Seriously, it is so pervasive. And I understand that it comes from lots of different factors that impact us, where we feel limited, if not helpless, to make changes in areas that we look to the world and we say, this needs to change. And we understand the limitations of that. But that is not about us being victimized. And may I be clear that, in fact, there are experiences in life where we are victimized. And when that happens, it's our task to do whatever we need to do to heal through that and to not get caught in the toxicity of those experiences. But a lot of people are using a kind of victimhood to not take action, because taking action means taking risk. And it's always easier to do nothing, right? The state of homeostasis is basically to not move. So if we're going to create change, it means we're going to have to move. We're going to have to take action. We're going to have to move out of what is comfortable. And some people are just don't have the energy for it, don't have the wherewithal, aren't interested. They want to just stay where they're at, and they believe that they're in their comfort zone, but they're not comfortable. It's just what's familiar to them. So staying in a mindset of being victimized is one of the most toxic things we can do to keep ourselves from living life in a full, purposeful, meaningful, happy way. And what happens very often is when people posture as victims, they make themselves open to being preyed upon as victims. And that's really important. If you posture like a victim, you're more likely to be victimized because you're showing up in the world from a position of relinquished and diminished power. So it doesn't serve us at all to stay in that kind of posturing of being a victim. It is so much more, pardon me, it is so much more empowering to take full responsibility for every choice I make. Because that puts me in the driver's seat of my life. And yeah, sometimes it's hard to own our mistakes, our dumbness. Sometimes we're willing to do things that are not in our best interest, right? We make a poor choice. But if we own those, that's where we have the opportunity to create the change and to do it differently. If I put it off out into the world onto someone else that I've been victimized by my own choices, then that doesn't serve me as well. If I say, okay, I take full responsibility for my thoughts, my actions, my feelings, my choices, when I do that, that is the most effective, empowering place from which I can live.
I agreed 100%. But then that raises the question is, okay, now that I take full responsibility for my actions, a lot of people where they get it wrong is that they also don't take full responsibility for the actions of others, even if it's not their fault. And it's not to blame yourself. I feel like there's a fine line between blaming yourself for something that someone else did to you and taking responsibility. Because I feel like responsibility is the person who has responsibility has the power. And if you give that responsibility up to someone, and not the blame, I feel like those are two very different things. But if you give the responsibility up to someone, then you'll forever be at the mercy of whether or not they want to give you back that power. And until you take, as you were saying, that full responsibility, full accountability for everything that happens in life, good, bad, and indifferent, and everything in between, you won't be able to tap into, I feel like, your most power. And switching from that mindset that even when it's not going your way, no matter what it may be, that, life happens for you, and it might not make sense of it all, but that traumatic experience, that whatever it may be, you might have gone through that. And yes, it was a terrible thing, but if you can, find a way to reflect on that and grow from that, the amount of people you could help get through that similar experience, the amount of people that you could potentially help, then so it's a very fine line, a very difficult line to kind of tread along. But if you could tread carefully and tread properly, that whatever, no matter what experience you went through, you could turn that into a flower that blossoms in the road, right, in the concrete, and help, hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe millions of lives, just based on something.
Yes, and that's, I think, a really important distinction, John. And I would say, for example, if a child is in an abusive situation, they're being victimized and they're dependent and they're helpless in that dependency. And so they are indeed being victimized.
Hmm.
They don't have the power necessarily to get out of that situation, right? They just have to endure it until they're old enough or capable of emancipating away from that situation. If you're talking about a situation of, say, domestic violence, the perpetrator is abusing, harming the abused, and the perpetrator is fully responsible for their behaviors to that person. And that person is being victimized by that abuser. The victim, however, and I'm talking about an adult victim, does have and can find resources to be able to get out of that situation and create something new for themselves. So they must respect the impact of the trauma that they've experienced. They must get help to work through that trauma and to heal through it. And they must take responsibility for moving their life forward beyond that experience, while holding the person who was abusive accountable for their behavior, knowing that they didn't cause that person to abuse them, right?
Mm.
Person chose to do that. But they were, in fact, victimized because of it. And they have a responsibility to figure out how to disengage from that and to move forward. And that's not easy. I don't want in any way to communicate that people who are in those kind of difficult situations, people who are caught in the trauma, frozen in trauma from a loss or an accident or something that has happened that has impacted the mind and the nervous system, and they are frozen in that. I'm not minimizing that experience at all and the reality of how that is and how it feels. I am saying, however, that when you begin to understand that you have the internal resources to figure out how to move yourself forward, and you begin to take steps to do that, you can disengage, you can heal through that, and you could create something in your life. And as you said earlier, sometimes that takes tremendous courage and effort and sometimes struggle, but it sometimes takes a tremendous amount of investment of energy to move out of those positions, out of those experiences into a life of empowerment. So I think that distinction is really important. That's very different than people who are experiencing themselves as being victimized because they have not cultivated resilience in themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation, John, about the importance of cultivating resilience. How do we cultivate resilience? I mean, think about resistance training. What are
Yeah.
you doing? You have to have that push, that resistance to get strong physically. It's true emotionally and mentally, spiritually as well. So we're not going to cultivate resilience. We're not going to become strong if we pull back and say, well, I'm not going to engage because I'm protecting myself. That is not going to serve anybody at all in their lives. It can be understandable, but it doesn't serve you well.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I love the fact that you kind of brought up training, and I feel like a lot of things that people tend to neglect in life is the difficulty, is for example, in football, it's the 6 a.m. workouts. It could be the going to the gym. It could be the eating the diet or whatever. It's easier to think of physical resiliency things. It comes off. I played sports, so those that come to mind are always the fastest, right? But it's difficult kind of to train yourself in those situations because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so, how does one then, I think you kind of stumbled on to another point. It's like, how does one, discomfort tend to be something that keeps people stuck. How does one kind of break free from the discomfort, whether that may be discomfort of starting or maybe the discomfort of training and, practicing resiliency? How does one get freed from that discomfort so that they could start to make, action in their life?
Honestly, the way that we are wired is that we tend to respond more readily to pain than pleasure. We just do. That's just how we're wired. Our nervous system, our brain, uh, we prefer the path of least resistance. We like to be comfortable. And so usually what happens is that when we decide that we need to make a change, it's usually because the pain has reached a level of discomfort that is no longer tolerable. So it's important for us to realize that we can make a shift as that pain becomes stronger, and the stronger it becomes, the more we are inclined to take steps to make change. The other side of that, however, is what we were talking about earlier in terms of vision development, is that the more clear we are about the destination of where we want to be, the pleasure of that magnetizes us forward. So we can respond to pleasure moving forward, but it's usually pain that will cause us to want to move in a different direction. And unfortunately, what sometimes happens is we start to make movement forward and there's some relief of pain, and then we just kind of stop until we find ourselves retreating back to what's familiar, and then it pushes us forward again. And this is probably one of the greatest challenges I find in my work with people, is that people will come to me and they'll be in a lot of pain. And they're like, I got to make a change. Something's got to happen. I can't live like this. And we began to do the work and they start to feel change and they start to make movement and they've got some relief and have a little bit more energy. And they go along and they're starting to see progress. But then what sometimes can happen is, in order to really solidify that change or to continue on that path of change, it means going a little bit deeper to maybe some harder stuff, of looking at that and dealing with that. And sometimes people don't want to do that. It's like, okay, I'm feeling better now. It's been great. Thanks. And they go on their way. And I always think, if you would, and I always honor that with people. It's like, because they're going to go on their way anyway, right? But I sometimes think if you only knew that if you would have just stayed with this a little bit longer, the richness of awareness that you would have gained about yourself and who you truly are and your true strength would have been so amazing and so satisfying and would have served you so well. And so I have seen it over and over again over the years that people have some pain relief, then they kind of stop, and then they kind of go on their way, and they miss the opportunity of really that more full cultivation and strengthening of who they are that would really take them to where they really want to be, not just at a more comfortable place, but at a place that's truly satisfying and purposeful and content. So yeah, I see that often with us, and I think that's just our natural inclination.
Yeah, it reminds me of that story, the 3 feet from gold story. The people that were in the gold mine, and the one guy, he went digging and he was 3 feet away from gold, but didn't realize it. And then he ended up leaving. And the other guys came into the gold mine and kept on digging a little bit more and became rich beyond imagination. That kind of story goes to pretty much say that it's usually right in front of us. And if most people quit too soon, most people let up too soon, and they turn back. And as you said, like, if they were to take the time, whether it's, in an entrepreneurial endeavor, whether it's taking the time to self-reflect, kind of like we were talking today, if they just took spend a little more time and to see where they could actually take it. A lot of people would realize time, usually, if used wisely, you'll inevitably be successful, because it's, so many people just fail from quitting early, that if you last, you're likely to be successful just from lasting, right? So we kind of talked today about, a lot of different things. We talked about, kind of breaking free from some of those limiting beliefs growing up around money and other situations. We talked about, how could we envision the life we want to live, and help to kind of use that final destinations to help push us through whatever storm or wobbly bridge that we may be crossing or going through. We talked about, how taking responsibility and accountability in certain areas of life can really help you and benefit you. We talked about a lot of things, Susie. Where could we find more about information about, where to connect with you, so that we can continue kind of going on in this self-discovery and this journey with someone, as you said, that is a profession that has helped people get to the finish line? Where could we connect with you? Where could we find you at?
The easiest way to find me is go to freedfromstuck.com. That's my website. And I have lots of resources there. And if you're interested in an initial consultation, you can contact me through the website. I also have my book, Freed from Stuck, and you can get that through a link on the website, or just go directly to Amazon and find the book there.
Amazing, Susie. And now it's time for our favorite part of the podcast. We find the 4 questions that we ask every single guest that comes on. First question: what is the most impactful lesson that you learned in life?
Wow. That's no small question, John. What have I found that's most impactful in my life? I'm going to answer with the first thing that came to mind, and that was, I had been a caregiver for my husband for over a decade. He had been diagnosed back in 2008 with a rare genetic disease called CADASIL, which is a progressive dementia. And he died in December of last year. And I guess what was impactful in that was that he came to the end of his life, and he had lived his life well, even as that disease process had progressed. And he was at peace, and I was at peace in his transition, that it was as it needed to be. And to be with him in that transition was very impactful to me, because he had lived his life well, and he was ready to transition. And I was there with him when that happened. And it was peaceful and it was beautiful. And uh, it impacted me deeply.
I don't want to get too much into the conversation, but I love that you took that from that situation. A lot of people, I think personally, that passing away isn't something that should be mourned upon. If especially if no matter what you believe, if you believe that the other person is going to a better place, I feel like it's something that should be celebrated. More than, as you said, and be at peace with it, and just be grateful that you were be able to be a part of that experience. Um, and so I love your answer. Second question is, what is the most admirable trait that a person can have?
Oh, I don't know. We all have such different values around what we admire. I think I really admire people who are truthful. And I don't mean blunt, and I don't mean rude, and I don't mean bullying. I mean truthful in that people who can speak their truth, and particularly speak their truth with compassion, with integrity, with openness, with receptivity. Those are people that I admire.
If you had to change someone's life with one book, which book do you recommend?
I honestly don't know how to answer that question. Not one book comes to mind. I do not have an answer for that question.
What's a great read that you would recommend then in substitute that you read fairly recently?
Probably one of the most impressive books that I have read in a while is Atomic Habits. I think it's such a great resource for creating change. I think he presents one of the most comprehensive studies of habit formation and the change process. That book I highly recommend.
And what is the legacy that you're trying to leave behind?
I want people to come to know who they really are and to live in that fullness and to embrace the quality of life that they deserve.
And that's a great way to wrap up the episode, Susie. As you know, all good things must come to an end, and I really enjoyed our conversation. The hour-long interviews always go by so fast, and I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to tap into, your connection and to get connected somehow, some way, and have this conversation with you today. And I'm very thankful for all the insight. You helped me realize one of my beliefs was very scarce minded. What I said about the taking what's yours thing is a very scarce way to look at the world, and I didn't even realize that I was saying. So I appreciate you enlightening me. And I know for a fact that the audience will definitely take a lot from this episode.
Well, it's been an honor and a delight. You've asked some amazing questions. You challenged me to think in new ways. I love that. So thank you so much for that opportunity.